is that we say Baruch Dayan Hamet, blessed is the true judge, meaning that we don't know what to do with this, and we have responsibilities and we have obligations, and our question is, what can I do to help? And that's always our answer, our question, because the question, I mean, unless you're in a professional in the field to say, why did this happen or how did this happen? Those questions we may not have answers to, but what can I do to help is always the right question to ask. And that's the question we have. So everyone's families, it's horrible for the victims, horrible for their families, horrible for the community, horrible for the state, horrible for humanity, because it's one more thing that then just sets the bar and the expectations of something horrible happening. And Colorado seems to have been a very strangely, weirdly focal point for a lot of these really horrible things to happen. You look at our place, it's such a beautiful place to live. Like, how does this happen here? So, I think going back to Columbine and the movie theater, and like, it's just, people ask kind of not jokingly, but like, what's going on there with what's going on? So we don't know. So we should daven for everybody who's injured, and for healing for those, and strength and comfort for all the families, for everybody who was impacted, and the ongoing impact now, how everybody feels now walking into a grocery store where everybody is going to be. It wasn't enough that we had to worry about that we're going to get COVID. Now we look to see if anybody's trying to kill us. And, just that feeling that we should walk around, that people should walk around like that, of going to the store or going someplace ordinary with a sense of fear of their fellow human beings. That may be the biggest crime of all, is that it just changes how we relate to each other. And that is the worst thing ever, after the actual deaths and harm. And the people who work in the stores, can you imagine coming to work the next day? It was like, I want a bulletproof vest. It's the ramifications of this kind of thing are just beyond our comprehension. So ladies, we'll focus on something that we can focus on, which is the upcoming holiday of Pesach. And I want to put it together with the parsha for this week, which is the parsha of Tzav, with a very interesting section in the parsha. And someone's popular.
Music.
You know what I'm going to do?
That person isn't muted.
There you go. And you can unmute if you have a question. Okay. All right. In Parshat Tzav, I don't have my chumash with me. I have this sefer here from Rabbi Pliskin. It is from chapter 6, verse 4 of Vayikra. And it talks about the priest, that the priest shall then take off his garments, his priestly clothing, and he shall put on other garments and carry forth the ashes out of the camp into a pure place. Says, what are these ashes? Says, these ashes are the ashes left from the sacrifices from the day before, that the Kohen would put on basically his work clothes and take them out. And interestingly, they had to be put into a pure place. Normally you would think, where do ashes belong? They belong in an ash heap. It's like, what difference does it make? But they were put in a place of honor. And these are the ashes, the leftover, what was from the previous day's sacrifices, and why were they saved? So number one, why is it, what does this represent for us? So at the most basic level, the ashes from yesterday represent yesterday's efforts. Now those efforts, it doesn't say whether those efforts were successful or unsuccessful. It just means that they were there and that we keep them and we have a sense that they have specialness, so that the Kohen is not putting on, grungy clothes. He just puts on older clothes, older Kohen clothes. So still dressed nicely to take out the ashes. It was actually done by a Kohen who was at a pretty high level spiritually, because you have to be at a high level to recognize the significance of the task. It's like cleaning up after the party. It's like, it's very hard to do that because the party seemed like it was the exciting part, not the cleaning up afterwards. But the cleanup represents the completion of the task from what you have already accomplished. You accomplished this yesterday. Did it go well? I don't know. Did it go poorly? Did it go beautifully? Did it go perfectly? I don't know. But to honor my efforts, the ashes that are left, they would go into a pure place. However, they also went out of the most holy place. They had to at least go, we'll call it on the back burner. They couldn't be on the front burner because it represents yesterday's efforts. And we can't rest on our laurels. We can't rest on what we did yesterday and not look at what is in front of us today to do. What's my task today? Who am I supposed to become a better version of myself today? That's not yesterday's work, that's today's work. So while it goes someplace holy and someplace that is pure and is kept, it does not stay front and center, because the main thing is to get a fresh start on the new day. Without a fresh start, we are susceptible to two traps. The one trap is, look what you accomplished yesterday. And I'm not necessarily talking about being productive. I'm talking about personal growth or whatever it is. Look what you accomplished already. You're so great. You don't need to do so much. So take it easy. You don't have to really do anything today. So there's that of arrogance that keeps us from being motivated. And then the second is a sense of like, oh, I was such a failure. I made so many mistakes. I'm not motivated because of that reason. So lack of motivation can come from multiple places. I can be not motivated because I thought I was so great, and I can be not motivated because I thought that I was a failure. So I had my own little personal failure yesterday. It wasn't a huge failure, but my husband was the recipient of my failure. I was doing laundry, which is a task I've been doing for quite a number of years. And I somehow got this green rag in the load with the whites. Now, this was a rag that came in a set for cleaning my iron, where you put on this whatever to get like all the built up stuff off of it, and you rub it around and you rub it on this green cloth afterwards. I didn't think there was anything so magical about the green cloth. It just came in it. Well, the green cloth was also part with a white cloth, and I kind of wadded it up, and I had put the whole thing in the hamper with the whites, and so it all went in the whites. And then my husband's entire load of all of his underwear and his white undershirts, everything is mint green. Everything is mint green. That has never happened to me in my entire life. So I came out to him, I said, I had a little bit of a laundry accident. So like, what happened? So I told him, I tried bleach, everything else didn't help. So I said, well, all I can say is they're all in mint condition. So that was my answer to him. So he was very good sport. I said, now you'll be able to keep track of your old undershirts and your new undershirts, because they are marked by color. So anyway, does this mean I will never do laundry again because I'm such a failure? So obviously this is a little bit tongue in cheek. Of course, I'm going to be doing laundry because that was yesterday and next week is next week. But sometimes we think like, oh, I'm such an idiot. I'm such a klutz. I can't believe I did this. I can't believe I made this mistake. And this can be very damaging to us in our goal for growth, is because we make mistakes. So both of these things were symbolized by the Kohen taking the ashes out. What's interesting is this reference to this is in our davening in the morning. Not every synagogue does it. In fact, most don't, but some people make it their practice to read it. About the taking out of the ashes, just as a reminder each day to start fresh and to have the enthusiasm and the energy and the commitment and the excitement and all of that, to have something chadash, to have a new day and be full of inspiration to get the most out of what that day has to offer. So that is the piece that is connected to the parsha. But it goes deeper than that because it's definitely connected to the month that we are in, the month of Nisan, and the holiday of Pesach. So I wanted to tie those things together for us so that hopefully we can add a little different dimension or an additional dimension to our Pesach celebration coming up. So first of all, we know Nisan is the month, it's the spring month, and Pesach must be in the spring. The entire Jewish calendar is structured so that Pesach remains in the springtime because we have to see new growth. Why do we have to see new growth? Because that's the whole point, is growth. The whole point is personal growth and the kind of change and transformation and letting go of last year's fruit. It's like it was last year, now it's a new year. So we have the ashes that were in the temple or in the Mishkan, and in the outside, it's represented by spring. And even in Colorado, for those of us who are not here in Colorado, even though we've had 2 feet of snow last week and more snow this week, the spring flowers are pushing their heads up, and we've got tulip leaves and all the little crocuses and all those little things are starting because it's spring. And when it's spring and there's new growth, we're meant to be inspired by the idea that there could be something chadash, that there can be something new. That is the theme for Pesach as well. And we see that when you change everything in your house for Pesach, if you have open food, even if it is kosher for Pesach that you've had out in your kitchen during the year, you can't use it. You need a new container, like new spices, new matzah, new whatever. It's like new. That used to be one of my favorite things of going into my mom's refrigerator at Pesach, was to go in and see all the new containers of everything. You know, normally you go to the store, you get a few new things, but at Pesach to see everything's new. Everything is new. And it's just like, it's new, and so are you. It's new, and so are you. You see that new growth? It's new, so are you. And to say, what's new? What's going to be new for me in this coming year with this spring and this Pesach? What's the change going to be? We get so used to what we are doing. And then at Pesach, it's a combination of newness and change, which is another way of having newness. Changing your dishes, emptying out your cupboards, bringing in a new set of dishes, changing everything up, reorganizing. So it's like I said, that even like if you want to have a fresh idea about something, to go for a walk and walk in a place you don't usually walk, do something different so that you can become something different. That when we're always doing the same old, it's very hard to have a new approach to the same old. So changing it up makes that happen and just scrambles our minds a little bit to help us get in a different place. So when people even are trying to be creative, I need a change of scenery. It's like, why do you need a change of scenery? I need a change of pace. I need a change of whatever activities, because we need to have things to move, to have a dynamic process to kind of shake up the, like the snow globe, it just like it just all sitting there. It's like, shake it up. But this is a healthy way of shaking things up. You shake it up, make some changes, and this enables us to take a fresh look at ourselves. So it's interesting. I even do it it's not so much because I'm looking for a change, but partially, some of it is I just don't remember. After Pesach is over, after the 8 days of having our house completely rearranged in our kitchen, when we put back our chametz things, the regular year things, I always renegotiate where the things are going to go. Like, really, let's see, should these plates or these bowls be here, or would it be more efficient if we do it here? Should this be over here, or should this be there? It's a time to reevaluate. And that whole thing, so you can, going into Pesach as well as leaving Pesach, is reevaluate. Is this really working the best? Because usually, unless there's a problem, we tend not to just spontaneously change things up, unless you just kind of get that spring fever, like I need to do something. But I'm wondering if that human nature spring fever feel of like, I just, I need to do something, is that Hashem has planted in us a desire to have something that motivates us to not just keep on going without, I forget what is it, law of physics that you just keep going unless something acts on it. Entropy? I don't know what it is. One of those laws of physics.
Inertia.
Inertia, yes, thank you. The law of an inertia, it'll just keep going unless something interferes to move it. It says, so Pesach comes to move us. Pesach comes to move us. So it's like, you stay in your house, but you change it up. You're still eating, but you change your food. Everything gets all scrambled in order to create a new order. Because what we end up with is seder. It's not just, we're going to change it up and create chaos. It's like, but there is chaos before the order. So if you come into anybody's house who is preparing for Pesach and is doing all these changes, it always looks terrible before it looks good. The boxes are out, the things are out, everything's, discombobulated. And every year I think, oh my gosh, this is never going to come together. And every year, thank God, of course it does. But that's the nature of the change, is that sometimes we have to discombobulate a little bit in order to create a new order, a new way of being, so that we can consider new possibilities. So it's like, in an organization, somebody will come in, they're even called the change people who come in, see what's going on and change things up in order to do things in a better way. So we get to be our own advisors. Marla, you look like you have a thought. Are you going to say something? But you need to unmute it. No? Okay. Okay, you're going to say something.
I'm just in thought.
You're in thought.
I don't need to speak.
Okay, in thought. I can almost hear it. So you just even thinking about this process instead of like, it's like got all this stuff to do, is like, wow, this externalized process represents what I really want to do internally. I really want to go through and unpack the boxes, pack some things up, get rid of it. It's not useful anymore. It's not its time. It's a new time, new growth, new possibilities. Let's create a new Seder. Let's put a new order in place in my life. So that's just an insight for how we handle the preparations for Pesach in general. Then I also want to talk about matzah. Matzah says it doesn't get any more basic than matzah. So matzah is flour and water. It's the essence of food. If you could reduce it, of prepared food. I mean, obviously fruit and vegetables are also food, but a prepared food, matzah represents essence, because the other goal that we have is to identify our essence, identify who we really are. And this is from a beautiful class by Rabbi Ephraim Waxman. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce his last name, but it was called Becoming the True You. It's like, who are we? When we strip away all the other externals, who are we when we're just down to ourselves? Maybe I think we've talked about before that one of the things that's really beautiful when people go to the mikvah is that you remove everything. It's just your body. It's just you. Nail polish is off, the false eyelashes are off, your contact lenses are out, your makeup is off. Your clothes are off. You are literally the way you came into the world. You are kind of stripped down in a nice way, down to your essence. It's like, who are you then without all of our trappings? Because we confuse our trappings for ourself. If I said, and I'm just going to pick on Marla again, since I picked on her before, I said, Marla, you are a really pretty shirt. You would be like, what? I'm not a shirt. It's like, right, you're not a shirt. You are wearing a shirt. You're not a shirt. But sometimes we act like if I said to you, you are an amazing car and you are a beautiful house. You are an incredible, well, we do say this in jobs, but your essence of accountancy or whatever it is, that's who you are. It's like, well, it's not who I am, it's what I do, but it's not who I am. So we are so stuck, and I'm not talking about necessarily from a materialistic perspective of saying like the words we're stuck on externals. We're stuck on all of our externals. Even our talents are externals. Our abilities are externals. Those are things that we have. That's not who we are. Who we are is what we do with them, and who we become as we use our talents. Who am I as I use my money? Who do I become as I use my talents? How do I grow as I live in my house? How do I drive my car? How do I go to the store? That's who I am. Everything else is a prop. Whether we consider it an external or not, it's really a prop. So when I take it right down to flour and water, that's my essence. It's like, who am I? I love that from Les Miserables. Who am I? And who am I? I'm Jean Valjean. And he says his name, not the number. That's who I am. We are our neshamas. The question on Pesach is, can we connect deeply to our neshamas and take away all the externals, which are really considered chametz? But again, chametz is perfectly great during the rest of the year. We eat chametz all the time. My house is filled with chametz. It's fine. I need to be focused on my talents, my skills, my abilities, and my externals. All those things are part of the picture. But I have to make sure that I have 1 week where I get back to basics and remember who I am. It's like on Shabbos, when we get to the basics and remember we are the ones who were created. We are not the creators of the universe. So it's just shift in perspective, and the matzah is the shift of that perspective. What I am also not are my experiences and my situations. The circumstances of my life are also not me. If I am poor, that's not me. If I'm rich, that's not me. If I am, God forbid, in prison, that's not me. It's like, well, who am I? It's like, who am I? So the word for situation, the one word in Hebrew for situation is called a matzav. A matzav means a situation. We often identify ourselves by our matzav. It's like, oh, I live at 760 Magnolia Street, and I do this and I do that, and these are my circumstances, and I'm 5'4", and I this, and we have all of this external stuff that defines how we see ourselves and who we are. We read our resume and we think that's actually who we are. There's not a character resume. There's not one that says, I have become this kind of a person through the experience that I've had. This is the way I've grown from my mistakes. That would actually be a good resume, but that's not usually what we say. We usually say, I went to school here, I was in the top of the class, I had this job, I had this responsibilities. Like, that doesn't really actually tell me anything about who you are. It tells me what you've done. It doesn't tell me who you've become, because two people can have the exact same resume and be completely different people as a result of it. So we take away all that stuff. It's like, that's my matzav, that's my situation. But I want to offer that matzav is very similar to the word matzah. It's only off by one letter. So matzah is mem tzadi hey, and a matzav is mem tzadi bet. Matzav, matzah. So I want to go from seeing myself from my matzav, my situation and circumstances, to my matzah. So it's beautiful. The Jewish people, regardless of anything else about them, there's no rich man's matzah, there's no poor man's matzah or poor woman's matzah. There's just matzah. It's like, who are you really? Who is your essence? And that's called really your olam haba, your world to come self. Who are you in the world to come? Who are you in the world to come? So I've shared before that Steve and I bought our cemetery plots in Israel. And I've seen the size of the cemetery plot, because unlike in the States where it's like on this rolling grassy thing, you see the exact outline of the place where you will be. I don't see any room for my jewelry. I don't see any room for my house. I don't see any room for my bank account. I don't see any room for my computer. I don't see any room for anything. And as I understand it, be kind of a plain situation, will be kind of a matzah situation of who will be in there. So if I want to know who I am, I am who I am then, and actually picturing that is a more real sense. But the live version of it, who am I? Who am I in that situation? Marla, now you have something.
Now I do have something to say. But we are judged on our actions.
We are judged
So-
on, oh yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, but it's really a hard thing to dive into, that piece when you know you're judged by your actions, but sometimes that's not really who you are. So that's one piece. And the other piece is, what are the tools for people to learn more of who they are?
Yes, so you say, what are the tools to learn who they are?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to say, it's not easy to look at yourself and say, really, who am I? That's an interesting question if you really think about it.
It's a very interesting question.
My actions tend to be sometimes who I think I am.
Aha, so let's take a look at that, because it's a very good point. So when I said like our actions, what that really meant, like my job is not who I am. How I do my job is who I am. So I could be, and no offense to anybody who's a garbage collector, I could be a garbage collector and do my job honestly, on time, with consideration, and everything in a way that demonstrates me as a refined person, and I am an elevated person. It has nothing to do with the job I am, with those kind of actions. Or I could be president of the biggest company, and I could be rich, and I could be a completely horrible person. And I can't say, well, but did you see my nice suit? And did you see my office and the important decisions I made and how much money I have? Those kind of actions. So those is like, who am I? What is my character? Because that's the only thing I'm taking with me. I'm taking who I became as I was doing the actions I have. But you're also raising an important point, which is we also are not our actions unless we lay claim to them. That's why we have the process of teshuvah, of repentance, is where I say that action does not define me, and I step away from it, and I am not wearing it, and I consider it a dirty shirt, and I'm taking it off, and I don't want to have anything to do with that. In that way, then even my negative action becomes a positive thing, in that I have clarified the character I want to have, and I'm distancing myself from that. The mistake people make is they think they are their actions, and so they hang on to their behavior because they think it does define them, but it doesn't. It's who do you become through your actions. So we can do just about anything. That's why you can sit there. Who am I as I sit at my Seder table and eat my matzah? I could, you could have 600,000 different versions of who people are and who they are becoming through the simple act of making matzah crumbs on their table. It's like, we don't know what people are becoming, but we have to ask ourselves. We can't necessarily judge what other people are becoming, but we certainly can ask ourselves what we are becoming. Who am I becoming in this process? So it's interesting that it is traditional at a Seder for the Seder leader to wear a kittel, to wear the white robe, which on one hand is symbolic of royalty, but is also symbolic of death. It's also symbolic of shrouds. It's also symbolic of you're on this place of transformation, of we're in this kind of nexus point, because Pesach is like, if something is being reborn, then by definition, something else is letting go. Something else is ashes and something else is coming up. I didn't get that. You said he was cheap because he was having a check sent ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. But so who we are is like, are we patient? Are we kind? Are we compassionate? Are we firm? Do we have integrity? You can have integrity if you're a little kid standing in the grocery store, and if you're tempted to take a package of gum and you don't, then you're standing in the store near that gum and exercising that. You have just grown in your integrity. But we don't tend to think about it because we're mostly thinking like, oh, I'm standing in line. It's like, no, actually, this is an opportunity. all of these situations, all of these situations and circumstances are the backdrop. And as Marla, as you also started to say, or were saying, we use those things as our prompts, as our scenarios, but the task is the same regardless of the scenario. So a person in the poorhouse has the same task as the person who is wealthy. They both have a task to be in the right place with how they see their situation, and not stealing or being generous, but as they all, so I'm sorry, I mean the exact same task. They all have a spiritual growth task regardless of the circumstances. So the only question we really need to ask ourselves, instead of being so concerned about what the circumstances are, because that takes us very off track. If I think that I'm defined by my income, by my money, then I'm going to do whatever I can to get the most amount of money, because that's how I define myself. And I may do things that are right, I may do things that are wrong. So that there is a sense that, I lost my train of thought. That there is a sense that I need to be able to focus on what I'm doing regardless of what the situation is that I am in. And that I will do anything in order to protect my money, to get more money, etc. And it says that is enslavement. That actually is the shibud. That is the enslavement. To be free is to be able to connect to our truest self regardless of our situation. This was the gift of Miriam. Miriam's gift to the Jewish women and to the Jewish people was to say, your job, your task is to have children. Our task is not to worry about Pharaoh's decree. That's not what we're supposed to do. Our task is to have children, because we will become the people who will be redeemed. That's the task. That's the test. That's what we're supposed to focus on. Otherwise, it says that's actually being enslaved. And so in that way, they were free, even though they were still in Egypt. Even though they were still in Egypt, they were free. And a person can be free when they can be their true selves. And the true selves means that they can choose how they see the circumstances and how they can grow. There's even a beautiful book talking about spiritual growth, talking about a man who was, I think it was a rabbi, so I was often a rabbi in these cases, who was in the hospital. He couldn't do anything. He says, like, how am I supposed to serve Hashem in this situation? I can't do anything. He's like, I can lie here and think grateful thoughts. I can lie here. I can be pleasant to the nurses and doctors who are trying to help me. I can make a Kiddush Hashem. I can sanctify God's name in that way. I can say please and thank you. That is my service, because I'm still becoming, even if I can do nothing. So Pesach is about who are we becoming as we go through the process of all of these doings. And that's what we're trying to focus on. And then the challenge becomes recognizing that it's a process. So I'm quoting here also because I had already had it in mind, but then I watched a really beautiful, quick video from Sarah Lehrfield at Aish, and she was talking about Dayenu, that we sing Dayenu at the Seder. And we say, if God would have taken us out of Egypt, but if he would have brought us to the sea, but not split it for us, Dayenu. I'm like, I don't think so. If he would have taken us to Mount Sinai, but not given us the Torah, Dayenu. It's like all these steps, we say Dayenu, it would have been enough. Except the truth is we would say that was absolutely not enough. It would not have been okay if God took us to the sea and didn't split it for us. Be like, no, that would have been death. That would have been the end of us. But at the moment, as part of the process, that was enough. When is it Dayenu? The growth is a process. Becoming is a process. And we can say Dayenu as we go through each day, that we go through a process and say, we're not trying to get from here to perfection in one fell swoop. It's a process. We are a work in progress. And to be able to say, Dayenu, thank you for the lessons for yesterday. Dayenu, if you only did this for me, that would have been enough, because that was yesterday's portion. Just like going back to the ashes, that was yesterday's work. And today's work is today's work, and each thing stands on its own. And growth is not a process that can be rushed. In our instantaneous world where we can have where we think we can have everything that we want whenever we want it, it's like that's not really how it works. But we celebrate the steps along the way and can say Dayenu, and that is our goal. So we have, on one hand, we are saying, Dayenu, thank you for the process that I'm in. And on the other hand, we're saying, but don't stop there and keep moving forward, because we're still constantly trying to have more clarity about who we really are and who we are becoming. So what's interesting is probably in every situation in our lives, we can stop and ask that question. Kind of like how we started out when we said that sometimes our answer to something horrific is not why did this happen, but how can I help? Our question for many situations we're in is not why did this happen, but how can I grow? Who am I supposed to become more of in this situation? What is the opportunity in front of me? And sometimes people say, oh, I don't know. It's like, if you think about it, you probably will know. If it's a situation, it's going to be one of several things. You can kind of do a checklist. It's either going to be more patient, or to be more compassionate, or it's going to be less, what's the word? I don't want to say less accepting, less complacent. Maybe it's the challenge to become more active, to be more responsive, more assertive. Maybe that's what I'm supposed to be in this situation. Maybe I'm supposed to be more generous. Maybe I'm supposed to listen better. Maybe I'm supposed to speak up. Maybe I'm supposed to be soft. Whatever it is that we need to identify, what is the thing? And we're not even saying that what we're going to do is going to help the situation. It may not help. It may absolutely not help, but it helps me. And in the end, now that sounds kind of selfish, but in the end, that's what we're working on anyway. That's the big project, is us. So it's like, we're the matzah. It's like, as we work on ourselves, and then it's up to the infinite creator of the universe to put that all together and see what becomes of that. But when we look at circumstances and situations, it also changes the focus, because sometimes it's like, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? How can I fix this? How can I make this better? It's like, sometimes, you know what, there really isn't anything that you can do, but we can become something greater in the midst of what we are going through. And so Pesach invites us to all of that. Thoughts, comments, suggestions? Eileen, yes.
You mentioned becoming. There's a wonderful book with, maybe you read it, Michelle Obama. She wrote her book, Becoming, and it's a wonderful story of her life. It reminded me of becoming. And the other thing is, arrogance can lead into, very ugly situations of, like, who am I, because I wear a nice suit or shoes or whatever. If you're arrogant, then you're not the real person. The other comment is Dr. Sanders teaches Kabbalah, and he talks about, do we wear a mask, or does the mask wear us? And so that's kind of interesting, do we hide ourselves, or, do we cover ourselves with the mask? So who are we? Who
are we? That's a great question. So that takes us back to Purim. It's like, is the mask covering, or is it revealing?
Right.
Right. Is it showing, I used to always dress up as a princess or a queen. That was like how I saw my real self, of like who I wanted to be.
Yeah.
So yes, it's like, what is it doing? Or we can talk about a mask, like the very original Beauty and the Beast story, the fable. He wore a mask. And then when it was taken off, his face had changed to be the face of the prince.
Mm-hmm.
At least that was my mother's version of the story that we read. And so we acted our way into our mask, so that the mask was not so much a falseness, but an aspiration. I aspire to be the person who I am dressed up to be. I think I shared before that a bumper sticker I saw that said, I aspire to be the person my dog thinks I am. Your dog who thinks you're like the greatest thing that ever lived, and you know who you really are, but your dog thinks you're great. So I want to be that person, so that it's fine to have an aspiration that we don't quite yet fit, that we practice, because we can practice having a quality that we don't yet have. And we wouldn't say, well, you know what, you're just acting generous, but you're not really. It's like, well, really? If I acted generously, then in that moment I was generous. Now, am I consistently generous all the time? Perhaps not, but that's okay, because I'm a work in progress. So a person, that's also part of the Dayenu. Dayenu that, I gave my 10 cents, today, Dayenu. But that doesn't tell me what tomorrow needs to be. It just says that was what was today. So we need to work our way into it. And Eileen, your comment about the arrogance was also really important, because arrogance is basically based on a false premise. That's what's so strange about it, is arrogance, a person who thinks they are their suit. That would be equivalent to me saying to Marla, you are a beautiful sweater. And anybody in their right mind would say, I'm not a sweater, I'm wearing a sweater. The person who's arrogant actually has a miscalculated, they're living in a world of falsehood, because they are identifying themselves because they don't yet recognize who they really are. So if you don't think you really are something, and you don't really know that you were created in the image of God, and that ultimately is all you need to be, and that you're working to just manifest that in the most expansive way possible, then you get confused and start thinking that you are your car, you are your position, you are your status, you are all those other things. And it would be equivalent to saying, you are very nice pictures on your wall. And you'd be like, I'm not pictures on my wall. Like, what if you had an original, Eileen, like if you had an original Picasso in your home, for all you might. And if I said, you are an amazing Picasso painting, you would think I was pretty silly. You'd be like, well, I'm not a Picasso painting, I have one. So when people get confused over what they have versus who they are, that's when arrogance, but it's coming from a false, they're living in a false world. And that's the ultimate sadness. And it's really because they think they're nothing. And that's the biggest tragedy of all, really big tragedy. Etta.
I once heard a term, to wear the mask of happiness. And I don't know where it comes from, but I remember it really hit me that, I didn't want to be a hypocrite as a young person. I was very careful to be straight with people, honest in every unpleasant way possible. But instead,
you did it your way.
Yeah. So then when I heard wear the mask of happiness, I realized that, that really will help to make you happy eventually. I mean, it may not work in a minute, but it will definitely help, because if you do those things that are happy making, it might work, it might not, but I don't know. I don't know if
Absolutely,
ever heard that with the wear the mask.
Wear the mask of happiness. So they've done scientific studies that the act of smiling changes the chemical, whatever that comes through your body, and changes you physiologically. Now, if you're going to see your therapist, this is not the time to do this, because you're trying to solve a problem and get clarity and to do something. So don't do that there, because then you're paying good money for nothing. So you want to be honest. That being said, to wear the mask of happiness and to smile and to focus on the things that are positive and to do things that help us feel more positive is also in this week's parsha. And it has to do with the offering that is the Todah offering, the Thanksgiving offering. And this is from Rabbi Pliskin. It says, to publicize your good fortune, the things that are going well, not in a bragging way, but in an expression of gratitude. And that's part of the mask of happiness, is really the mask of gratitude, which is also reality. That's the reality. There's, in any situation, there are always so many blessings that we are oblivious to, of whatever the proper grammar is there, that we don't pay attention to. So it says for the, excuse me, for the Todah offering, the person brought it with 40 loaves of bread. 10 of 4 different kinds. And the Kohen would get 4 of the loaves, which left 36. Now, what this was a forced sponsored kiddush. This was like that the offering required you to bring all of this bread with it, which by definition meant that you needed to find people to share it with, who you would invite. And you would invite them, and as part of the meal, you would express your gratitude for why you had come at all. Your gratitude to God. I'm so grateful, and it could be for anything. I'm grateful that my family's all together again. I'm grateful I got a raise. I so appreciate, healing from a sickness. I appreciate, moving to a new community and having a warm welcome. All the things that people sponsored kiddushes for, that people would have a todah offering, and that they would have this 40 loaves of bread that they had to include, and it had to be finished within, I think, like 36 hours, like a day plus. And you had to finish it, which meant by definition, you had to share it with others, and you had to talk about positive things. And that this was a form of service to God, but it also is catching, because when people express gratitude, they are always happy. It's not like, I just want to say thank you to everybody that helped me. It's like, really, I'm so upset. It's like, whoa, you're wearing the wrong script with the wrong face. It doesn't go. So the expression of gratitude, even when people are in horrific situations, people who are rescued for something, I'm so grateful. And there are tears of joy, even in their pain, because they're expressing gratitude. So gratitude is the key to wear the happy mask, the mask of happiness. And to get into that place, which is also what Pesach is. It is a night of expressing gratitude. That when we have the mitzvah, vehigadata, and you shall tell the story is to tell the story from a place of gratitude, even though it includes very painful parts. But we put it all together into, which we talked about before, into a whole, it comes into a whole story. And but it's an expression of gratitude. And gratitude makes people smile, and makes people happy, and it makes other people happy too. And that's our goal. And that's coming from a place of reality. So matzah, dayenu, expressions of gratitude, creating the Seder, putting ourselves intentionally in a place of discombobulation so that we can renegotiate who we are with ourselves. Who are we really? Who are we trying to become? What's the definition of our essence? What's the matzah of the situation and not the matzav? What's the matzah of it? What is the essence of it? And who am I becoming in the process of all of this? Pesach, the best holiday ever.
Amazing.
Baruch to you. Any questions or any other Passover questions that anybody wants to ask about anything that we observe, or symbolism of anything else that we have? There's so much to talk about. Oh wait, there was one more thing. Hold on, let me see. Oh, I'll just share this with you since we have time. I heard this from a rabbi who's a friend of our son's in Israel, from their yeshiva, Rabbi Leibowitz, and he was talking about, the part of the Seder where the rabbis are all gathered in Bnei Brak, and then their students, they're talking through the night, and the students come and say, rabbis, it's time to say the morning Shema. Are people familiar with that part of the Seder at all?
Yes.
Okay. So anyway, it's like, so normally we think about the rabbis, they were so engrossed in telling the story of the Seder that they didn't even realize that they had talked through the night, and their students have to tell them it's time to say the morning Shema. So this was a beautiful understanding. It says, let's take a look at this. It says, what's the difference between the morning Shema and the evening Shema? So in the morning Shema, in the evening Shema, we end it with Adonai Elohechem emet, God is true, ve'emunah, and faithful. We talk about emunah and faith, and we talk about that at night. In the morning, it ends with emet v'yatziv, it is true and certain. And we go from a place of, at night, we talk about emunah and having faith and trust when we don't have clarity. It's a time of darkness, and so I have faith at this time and trust. But in the morning, when things clear, it means the actual morning, but also the morning in times of redemption, of having clarity. And that what the students were saying was not, rabbis, you talked through the night and now it's time to say the morning Shema. They were saying that through the process of the Seder is a clarifying experience, that we go through a process of mental clarification about reality. And that we go, even though the Seder starts at night, we go from a place of uncertainty to a place where we end the Seder, regardless of what time it ends, that we come to a place where we're ready for the morning Shema, where we come to a place of mourning and clarity and certainty. And that's what they were saying, is that we have come to a place of certainty. Just like we talk about, people say, just using the vernacular, never mind Jewish, a new dawn has come, the dawning of a new day, morning has broken. We're not necessarily talking that it's 6 a.m. We're talking about that there has been a change and there's clarity. And that's why we say it's time for the morning Shema. Now we can say something with more clarity than we had when we first started. So the Seder itself is meant to take us on a bit of a journey. Even if you're just still sitting at one table and you don't move the whole time, it's still meant to be a spiritual journey where we start off with, this is the bread of affliction, and we end with, and this is the redemption and the ultimate redemption. It's like, well, how did we do that? That we went through the process of telling the story and created a new order. So that's our goal through our Seders. However many people are at our Seders, even if we are on our own at our Seder, we're still trying to ultimately make Seder in our own lives, and to see if the order that we have that's worked for the past year is still the order we want to have for the coming year, or whether there's new growth, new leaves, new sprouts, new everything, which again, also when we have the Seder is symbolized usually by having something green. You don't have to, but we have something that grows in the ground. So you can have potato for your karpas, which isn't green, but most people have parsley or celery. I don't know what your different family customs are, parsley, celery, but you can have anything that grows in the ground, because the definition is something that grows out of the ground that was hidden, which is different than flowers sprouting from a tree. When things are on a tree, okay, so the tree is still there. I don't think that the tree's not there. The tree is there, and it's going to have buds and new growth. That's one thing. That's also for the month of Nisan. But something that's sprouting from the ground, it looks like there's nothing there. And then you see something poke its head up, and it's like such a surprise to see that there's something there. So that's the kind of new growth that we're trying to get at, is what has been hidden and underground and now is sprouting new in me. And I want to be able to see it and recognize it. And it's so exciting. It's like why they always do planting projects, with kids. And I remember our kids, they would, at Tu B'Shvat, they would plant little parsley seeds, and then that would be grown enough for them to, and be big enough for them to eat at their Seders by Pesach. But it's so fun to watch something sprout. It says, what is the ultimate sprout? Is us. In fact, Mashiach is called a tzemach, that he's a sprout. It's called a tzemach, a sprout of the house of David. So being a sprout is, which always just reminds me of Jolly Green Giant. Sprout, I think, was his little sidekick for the commercials, whatever. Those are the things I remember. But sprout is like, we're a sprout. So if we are a sprout and we're a new sprout at the time of Pesach, what are we going to grow and become? If you notice that when plants sprout, at first they all look the same. Those two little leaves, little sprout. And it's only with time that you can tell what it's going to be. And so in our situation, we get to choose. So we get to do whatever genetic engineering on ourselves. It's like, it's a sprout, and it's at its earliest stage. Maybe it's like stem cells. Stem cells, they can go any number of ways. When they're in that original form, they can go any number of ways. So when we're at the stem cell stage, when we're at the sprout stage, we get to determine how the new growth is actually going to take place. So God willing, we'll all sprout brand new at our Seders and grow and have just amazing things that we'll see in ourselves and those we love. And find our truest selves and make ourselves come closer to that even more in this coming year. So I want to wish
Amen.
you a very Chag Kasher V'Sameach. You should have a beautiful Pesach. We will not meet next week since it's Pesach, and we will resume on, I believe it's April 6th. Yes, we will resume on Tuesday, April 6th. So I hope you have a wonderful Pesach. I hope it's inspiring. And we should all just have Bisorot Tovot. We should have good news and good things, and the world should see an end to all sadness and pain. And we should be next year, Shana Baba Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem, with things, the world perfected.
Amen.
It's time right
Thank you,
now.
Ellen.
And I have a very short.
Sameach.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Have a
Ellen.
wonderful
Chag
Pesach.
Sameach.
Chag
Chag
Sameach.
Sameach, everybody.
Thank you,
Wonderful.
Ellen.
Thank
Thank
you very much.
Thank you, Ellen.
Can I
My
ask you something?
pleasure.
Happy Passover.
Chag Sameach.
Thank
Thank
you, Ellen.
My pleasure.
Thank you
Thank you. So nice to have you, Belina. Thanks for joining.
Everybody, thank
Ellen.
you for all your
My
contributions.
pleasure. Chag Sameach, Tamara.